welcome to 850 ArmorWorks YouTube channel. I'm Michael, and I'm going to be your host here doing most of the builds based on our armor. So you can have easier access to being able to build our kits and utilize some of the same techniques that we use in our shop. Follow along and be sure to subscribe and hit the like button on our videos. And tune into our Facebook page and our Instagram at 850 ArmorWorks Official, facebook.com/850Armor. Hi guys, we are here with the First Order Stormtrooper yoke and back. This is probably the most complicated part of the build in itself. It's definitely my least favorite part of the build, but it's really not that hard to do, especially if you just follow a few simple procedures. And you're going to need a pencil. See my handy-dancy fancy pencil sharpener here. Makes a nice fine point, and a couple of clamps and some sandpaper to get started. Reoriented the workbench here, so it's a little bit different than my usual orientation of working. But the main thing that we're going to do is the yoke will go on the inside of it. The back plate goes to the outside. And these holes, well, whatever we're calling them, the circle and two lines, they were left in to give you a nice alignment point right there. So that aligns really well whenever you just put it in. All these pieces were molded together, so they kind of overlap real easily with each other. But since we have that done, I'm going to go ahead and drop a couple of clamps in. Then I'll check the orientation, make sure everything looks good and square, and then I'll take the pencil and we'll go ahead and get a good pencil mark in here of where it's going to overlap on the outside. Now we're putting the pencil mark here. We'll go ahead and do it on the inside to give us a good reference point, even though we can really generalize it. We're putting the pencil marks in here so that we can know glue points and the areas that we're about to sand, which is what we're getting into next. So that's good. I've got a good pencil mark on both, and we can separate it. Get it in here, close-up camera, and I got a nice little pencil mark. Now, I like cutting them like this instead of the straight line. It gives you something to build up on, and a straight line can just flat out crack, and it's not an easy thing to patch into. So with this assembly, we're going to use it wavy. And here's whatever grit I had laying on the table. 150. Actually, I want some 120 for this. 150 will work. I just personally feel like using some 120 right now. And sand the inside of the part. All the way up to the line that we made on the inside. We're doing this to get the gloss surface off of the ABS and to create a tooth for the glue to stick on. Now, super glue and accelerators, two favorite things to use when putting together armor, but for certain, it sticks fast. So I really try to avoid using the accelerator and rely on the surface tension and the teeth of the ABS to come to grip together and fuse together. So that's nice and sanded. You can feel a real good roughness on the inside of it. And then we'll do the same thing here, sanding all the way up to the edge. Now, fun fact about this yoke, whenever I was making the mold for it, it's huge. It barely even fits on our machine. And good thing is, it's the only thing that fits on there. So pulls always turn out really well. But our orientation is dead center, and it's so wide from the front to the back that these two are what thins the most. So the back actually turns out a touch thinner. That works out really well because it's flexible. So it really helps to get all the parts and pieces in here and join together real nice. So these two are sanded, and my next step is going to be to bring over the super glue and the accelerator. I'm using Fast Cap 2P10 thick. This has become my preferred super glue, and I really like the repellent accelerator. It works really well for penetration. What I'm doing here is just making sure we dust out some of the extra ABS that may come off with the sanding. Doesn't have to be super clean, but we're just going to follow along the edges of the part. We want to get close to the edge because it's going to squish a bit, and I'm going to try to shoot the accelerator into the gap. Sometimes it turns out great, sometimes it takes a little finagling, and then to make a couple of runs on the inside right here. So here comes those pencil marks we were talking about. That's what I'm using for my guide point first. Just want to kind of line it up, get it in there. Start in the middle and work your way out. So go ahead and apply pressure in the middle and choose one side to go on and hold it down to get that super glue to activate. Try not to get on your fingers like I just did on the inside of the part. Pretty confident there. Feels pretty good in the middle. Just squish it in. That's all we're doing. Just squish and apply pressure. All right, I'm pretty confident that that's set well. Now we'll start squirting some of the incinerator activator down into the cracks, crevice, and joints. Try to flash cure some of the glue and let it set up hard as a rock. And if I can pull out the part a little bit, I'll squeeze some accelerator in there and get it back together real fast. That forms a nice permanent bond. Yeah, I can't even really pull this side out. It already got a good bond in it. We'll get a bit in there just in case. And I can hear the cracking and fizzing going on from the chemical reaction between the two. Let's make sure we're set up at the top. The top doesn't bother me quite as much because of what we're about to do next. All right. So that's the basic yoke, but now we have this gap to fill right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is use the super glue as a filler. But I do this differently sometimes. That's one way I like to do it, but there is another way. And that other way is an ABS slurry, which is something I'm actually going to work up next. But first things first, I'll go back to more sanding on it. So if I'm going to use an ABS slurry, I want to build up that step with a slurry. This is where butt joining would be really good, but this is not a piece that you want to have butt jointed. And just about everything on this suit gets butt joining except for this. This works a lot better with an overlap. So we're just going to sand, because this is the only area I'm really building up, even though that ABS slurry is going to stick. So I'm talking about an ABS slurry. You may not be familiar with it. It is basically cut ABS strips, shavings, dissolved into acetone, and brushed up on the surface here as a buildup. Once it dries, all the acetone evaporates, you can sand it down, and then we can attack it with some flexible filler. Evercoat Polyflex would be the next thing that I put on top of it after the slurry's done. But what we're going to do here is go ahead and get the slurry on, because the slurry needs to dry overnight. We'll have to come back in the next video, or the next segment of our video, to show you where that's going to go. So let me get a slurry ready real quick. And now we're coming back online with the ABS slurry portion of the first order back plate. So we've already glued it together and sanded the area where the ABS slurry is going to go. You can look it up and watch plenty of other videos and whatnot on how to make a slurry. I'm using shavings from our bandsaw from trimming down armor. It's pretty clean. It's a mix of black and white. Won't really matter ultimately whenever it's painted. And I just start with a little bit of acetone and start mixing it up. You can see I have a separate cup over here in case I get a little too much acetone in it. Come on, a little bit more than that. You can do better. There we go. And I'm just trying to get a paste. We're basically turning the ABS and acetone kind of into a Bondo mixture. Just a filler, because we're trying to build up this shelf across here. So I'm actually going to turn it towards me, because it'll be a little bit easier for me to work with it. And with this slurry, yeah, I kind of like that consistency. It's good. It's also going to create a more than permanent bond. So I'm really just trying to apply. If you get any big chunks, get rid of them. Just trying to apply it to the shelf. And I'm going to go ahead and stipple it just a wee bit. Really, again, all I'm doing is building up and creating extra strength so that these two sections will never come apart. Once this has had a chance to dry real well overnight, I can come back in and sand it, and then we'll put some flexible filler on top of that. I'm going to go ahead and do sides here, everywhere that I had a seam. Those big chunks out of there. Don't need no chunks. Now, if you do too much of a slurry, it does cause an issue. Acetone will eat through ABS, obviously. You're getting that lesson right now. Go ahead and just mix that in with the rest of it. Let it reconstitute itself. Oop, get a little bit on the armor. It's a good thing this stuff gets painted anyway. And I actually got this one a touch too watery. Just give it a second here to evaporate out, get some more material in it. Or should I say a little too acetone-y maybe. touch watery. I'll use it to fill a couple spots in here. There we go. Actually, I don't really mind this watery mixture too much. You just got to be a little bit careful with it. It's going to stick to itself. I mean, this is all ABS. Don't be afraid whenever you come in and start sanding it and see pock marks, because that is what the filler is for. There we go. We'll paint some happy stormtrooper armor here. Just a little bit of happy stormtroopers. There we go. And we're just brushing them along. There we go. That's a nice build-up right there. That'll really help with the seam. Yeah, touch watery isn't bad. Doesn't hurt a thing. Especially with the way it's curing up right now. Let's be sure to get all those little nooks, crannies, cracks, and crevices. And remember, it can all be sanded down and filled. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with all that. You don't want to over-apply, because it can eat through. I'm going to go ahead and be a good boy and run a little bit on the inside seam here. Doesn't hurt anything. Just give it a little extra reinforcement. Remember, acetone will eat super glue, but this is very well cured and doubtful it'll rip apart at all. It's almost like a tar. Yeah, if you think of it that way, it's tar that I'm putting on here. So at this point, we will just go ahead and let that cure up overnight. We're not going to worry about doing anything else to it, sanding it, whatnot. Just let it cure up, do its thing, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. Now, a quick note about what I was using. We've got acetone, 100%, pure acetone. Rubber gloves. Don't forget about PPE, personal protection equipment. These are caustic materials. I'm working in a very open-air environment right now. Just a big garage with some roll-up doors, so I'm not worried about fumes. Just some cups, paint cups, mixing cups, chip brushes from Harbor Freight. Had a plastic squeegee here just in case. Ended up wanting to brush anything over. Didn't look like that was necessary. So it'll go back over there, or right on the floor. And we are using 2P10 super glue by Fast Cap. A couple of clamps, a little bit of sandpaper. Trimming was initially done by the bandsaw. A little bit of fine trimming was done with this nice set of Craftsman straight snips. Picked them up at Lowe's. Been one of my favorite tools since I picked these up. I haven't had them that long, but they are amazing. And our good old trusty belt sander right here. If you are getting into this hobby, I cannot recommend getting a belt sander enough. It will be the best $100 you ever spend. Back with the first order back plate. This is overnight drying with the ABS slurry that was put on. Went ahead and sanded half of it over here, and going to show you the difference between the two sides of what the ABS slurry does after the acetones had a chance to dry up overnight. So you can see all the dust from all the sanding I've been doing. But all here is where I've sanded the slurry, and then all up here is where it's not sanded yet. So the main goal was getting this ridge to start fading away and disappearing, and it's pretty much done that. You don't want to sand too much. There's still going to be some little pits because the acetone's going to eat through unevenly slightly, but it'll definitely stop. There's, solid thickness right here between these two sides. So after we get this good sanded, you want feathering. This is feathering right here. You don't want to feel a transition. You can see transitions, and that's obviously a good place. But when you're really sanding, you want to feel it. So if you feel any dips or grooves or anything elevated, keep sanding, work at that edge, and work it and feather it down as you go. So I won't bore everybody with a whole bunch of sanding, but I will demo it ever so slightly. In fact, you can see, let's just go ahead and use a fresh sanding pad. That never hurts. I'm using 120 grit because that's what was laying on the bench. You mostly use 120 and 150. Depending on what we're doing, if I'm sanding the surface of something before painting or getting rid of any kind of residues, I'll go with like a 320 or a 400 grit. Yeah, it's sanding. Honestly, 90% of probably what I do is sanding. So some fresh 120 right here. And we're going to work in a circular motion and then try to feather up some of these higher spot edges right here. I wasn't very much sanding. That didn't take very long. We'll leave that in for real time. I said I didn't want to bore you with sanding, but really that was almost all we needed right there. So we can get a comparison difference. I still got a little bit more work to do, so I'll shut it off and finish it up, and then we'll bring it back for the rest of the filler. But that was just a little bit of sanding. I want to still come back in and get it a little bit more fine, and then we'll cut back. I'm going to take just a second to talk about a couple of the products that we use while doing builds and things of this nature. You have your standard, regular, everyday Bondo. You can use this to fill any of the little imperfections if you want to back there. There's nothing wrong with that. If it's what's available to you, you really won't need a whole lot for just doing one suit. I wouldn't recommend going out and buying a big can unless you just like Bondo and want to keep it around for future projects. There's nothing wrong with that. But the product I really prefer to use is the Evercoat Polyflex. We started using this years and years and years and years ago with clones. It's basically Bondo, but it's really flexible. It mixes up very similarly, but you don't mix up nearly as much. It's classified as a glazing putty. So what you really need to do is just get a nice skim coat over the surface. And that's the intention of that. I won't be using Bondo on this. There's no point. I got that. This really isn't that expensive. It's $45 delivered on Amazon, give or take. And one bottle will probably last 10 builds of armor, just depending on what you're doing. So it's definitely a good investment and something you should consider anytime you need to fill armor like that. So now that I've explained how we use our glazing putties and whatnot, we're actually going to go ahead and get into mixing and filling. So our tools are the hardener, the material, and clean spatulas. You want a clean edge because we're not trying to glob this up all over the surface. We just want a thin coat so it dries so we can sand it, so we can put on another coat so we can sand it, and voila, we're done. When you're working with this material, think of about a silver dollar. in size. That's really all you have to work with on time, about a silver dollar, and it's really all you need. Touch more right there, because I do work a little fast. Don't worry about it if you have to do it in 2 coats, but the one word of advice anytime you're working with anything like this, if it starts to turn into cottage cheese on you, stop using it. Just stop manipulating it, stop trying to put anything on, you're done. Let it cure. Now, as far as, let's make sure this is showing up on camera too, how much hardener we need, not a whole lot. That's probably way too much, but I'll have to work fast to compensate. Is just kind of stir it in at first and get it mostly mixed. Yeah, it's a pretty dark color blue, so this will cure a lot faster than what I'd like it to. That much is mixed up. And then I start spreading it a little thinner, make sure it's nice and mixed up. And that helps retard a cure a bit too. So just got a little bit on the spatula for the initial. And we're just going to lay it on and wipe it off. Lay it on and wipe it off. Just kind of lay it on, wipe it off. This is actually turning out really well. So if it needs a second coat, it won't need much. Just lay it on, wipe it off. That's the nice thing about the ABS slurries, is just the way that everything is now truly chemically bonded together. You can't get any connection better than that. Super glue included. And don't leave globs, because those are just a pain to sand down. Skim right back over them with a clean section of spatula. All right, and that's that. That's just some glazing putty, and that's going to cure. Going to let that cure for at least an hour or so, and then come back and sand it with some 180. And I may do another application after that. Sure, you get the sides here real well. They're the one area I'll glob up on a little bit in case there's a negative cavity. And that's about it. Nope, got a little bit extra right there. I don't want to have to deal with sanding off. Again, normal things, personal protection equipment, wear gloves. Any of these polyester resin-based chemicals get on your skin, they'll start burning, it doesn't feel very good. Don't really cause long-term issues unless you're breathing in all the time like I have over the past 22 years. Just a couple of spots missed my hand. Some black, and yeah, we're going to let this set up and get it actually to the camera, which I kind of can't. That's horrible now. I guess I'll have to work on that. That's all there is to that. So we'll come back and sand this, and really this is complete other than strapping. This is the main thing you really need to know about the back plate, how the whole system works together. It's very unique. No other Star Wars backplate does this.